Kaspars Petrovs confessed to murdering 38 women over a 3-year period of time in Riga, Latvia. He's known as the Verga von Riga, or the Strangler from Riga. Did this killer confess to everything, or are there more victims? In the year 2000, elderly people in Riga, Latvia, mostly women, began dying by strangulation. As police grappled for the clues in the cases, a 20-year-old transient roamed the city streets anonymously, steering clear of police suspicion. Slowly, the predator came into focus, though, and police became perplexed as their impact and influence became very microscopic. Why? Because their suspect only had one petty theft in his arrest history, and there was no indication that he had a violent past. Riga is the capital of Latvia and home to over 600,000 people. The entire country, though, has about 1.8 million inhabitants. Riga is the largest city in the three Baltic states, and it lies on the south side of the Gulf of Riga, an opening to the Baltic Sea. Riga was founded in 1201, and the Art Nouveau architecture is just absolutely stunning. The Latvians are known for their hospitality, and I must say, I found these to be just absolutely lovely people. In fact, I got to meet one of the Profiling Evil family members while I was here. Now, during the Middle Ages, Latvians enjoyed regular trade with the Vikings, and their life seemed ideal. They were fishermen. They got out. They were living off the land. It just seemed like a wonderful lifetime. The 20th century brought World War I and the impact of the Russian Revolution. Struggles for independence led to the shift of focus from Russia to countries of Western Europe, and soon the United Kingdom and Germany replaced Russia as Latvia's major partners. It got darker during World War II. Latvia was occupied by the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. Then Soviet authorities regained control over Riga and they imposed this regime of terror. They placed their headquarters of the KGB in Riga, and they began this mass deportation of people. Hundreds of men were arrested, including leaders of the former Latvian government. Eventually, they would move and expel more than 130,000 men, women, and children who were deported from the area, including executing more than 24,000 Jews. I asked my new Latvian friend Sandra to explain what life was like growing up in this kind of an environment and to talk specifically about some of the horrors that her parents and her grandparents went through.
Oh, I know this all only from my parents' stories. When the KGB came in first, that was 1940, and we call it a terrible year when Latvian people, thousands of them actually, were deported to Siberia, were taken from their homes and houses and sent to labor camps in Siberia, and they were not allowed to come back. And there was a total control. People couldn't even talk about the events which were happening because the KGB was everywhere, and it was really dangerous to say something against the government or the ruling power in those times, against Stalin and all that stuff. And then the Nazis came. That was 1941. And when Nazis came, they built concentration camps here in Latvia, and they threw Latvians into camps, and they threw many Jews, actually almost all of them, into concentration camps here, and they even deported Jews from other parts of Europe to the camps here in Latvia and Lithuania. And well, actually, my grandfather was killed in a Nazi camp. He wasn't a Jew. He was Latvian, but he was captured because some neighbors denounced him, and he spent, I guess, a year and a half in the camp near Riga, and they were about, with some other prisoners, they were about to escape, but and again there was somebody who informed Germans, and immediately all of them were shot. So I never knew my grandfather.
Much of this city was destroyed from the constant bombing in World War II, and historic landmarks like St. Peter's Church next to me or the House of the Blackheads was destroyed. But thankfully, they've painstakingly been rebuilt and restored. This is such a beautiful place, and I highly recommend traveling here. The food is incredible, especially make sure you get the dumplings. Well, let's talk about the victims here. This thing we call victimology, or the study of the victim. The victims were mostly single, senior citizens who were living alone. While there were some male victims, the vast majority were female, according to all the reports I've been able to find. The murders were occurring in a very small region of the inner city of Riga. And as the victim numbers climbed, police started recognizing not only a geographical pattern, but a demographic pattern, primarily among single dwelling, middle class neighborhoods. The homes seemed to fit the victimology of these elderly pensioners who were alone in their homes. Now, what was more frightening to police was that as they uncovered more of the crimes, they discovered that the offender was becoming more violent with every attack. The crime scenes seemed staged but eerily disturbed. Closer examination revealed a modus operandi that was both intriguing and terrifying. It brought up in my mind as I researched this an important grooming characteristic, and I've seen this occur not only in these murders, but in the murders that I've studied for the U.S. Department of Justice. For those of you who are longtime viewers, you know that my investigating partner, Greg Cooper, and I were hired to interview a number of serial rapists and murderers whose preferential victims were elderly women. This was a very narrow and specific study on this kind of a serial killer. Without exception, the predators that we spoke with shared that the victim's age and their vulnerabilities were primary reasons for the assaults. They learned that many times the elderly are just plain lonely and their support system is less than ideal. They are in the process of losing or have lost their ability to reason, and they accept help or companionship a little more readily. They're lonely. All of these challenges are components that these predators, and this predator in particular, tried to exploit. It causes us to reflect on our own parents and aging loved ones. Have we spent the appropriate amount of time with them to remind them not to give money to strangers without discussing it with us, their children, or other trusted advisors? Have we talked to them about being cautious about opening their doors to strangers, and definitely to be wary when a stranger asks if they can use the phone or get a drink on a hot day? I just wanted to add this little discussion for each of us to consider as we think about our own personal family inventory and what we're doing to protect our loved ones. Well, let's focus for a moment on suspectology, or this study of Kaspars Petrovs. As investigators sought answers in the slaying, they were also trying to better understand who this killer was. Kaspars Petrovs was a mystery. Nobody seemed to be painting a picture that would help them know who he really was. In fact, and I found this so fascinating, the police commander over the crimes unit, the prosecutor, Petrov's family, And even the local media were arguing against knowing anything about this accused killer. They said that it wasn't in the best interest of the court. What? I mean, think about this. This is right, folks. The sentiment was that direct. Listen as Sandra talks about how the government controls all of the information flow coming out, including in this particular case. Now, things are getting better, but imagine what it was like during the rule of the KGB and Nazi Germany, let alone just regular Eastern Bloc mentality at that time.
They simply didn't tell us. They didn't let the information on the media, and yeah, that's why we didn't know.
And is that normal?
Kind of, yeah. They don't tell in the USA. They sort of they are obliged to tell the public, but here it's not a common practice to inform the public about like crimes like this. Yeah.
Neighbors wouldn't share anything about the killer from their small hometown. Petrovs' successful physician father refused to share anything. His mother said nothing. His younger brother was the only one, and he said that he was a happy boy who loved biology and geography. Isn't that interesting? Biology, I found that interesting. He liked being the center of attention, and when he wasn't getting attention, he resorted to hooliganism. Was he not getting the attention that he needed? Deeper investigation revealed Petrovs did poorly in school. He dropped out in the 8th grade. Now, he later enrolled back in a secondary night school, and the principal there recalled that Petrovs had a posture defect and a speech impediment. So we start to see some of this other baggage that this kid was carrying along. Well, by the time he was 18, he'd been in trouble with the law and he got convicted of stealing. Now, there's something really peculiar about Kaspar Petrov's behavior, and the officer who arrested him later recommended that the court should keep him in jail the rest of his life. The officer said otherwise. In my opinion, there is a high probability that Petrovs will return and embrace the life of a criminal. The officer concluded his remarks by saying that prison time only taught Petrovs how to be a better crook, not a better person. Petrovs was raised in a community about 2 hours west of Riga. Again, his father was a prominent physician, and we don't know much about his mother. I found one report that suggests that he may have come from a large family, but I haven't been able to confirm that. I was unable to find anything about his teenage years beyond what we've been discussing, and I don't know if there were issues with deviancy, animal cruelty, sexual assault, or other criminal behaviors. I find myself returning to the study Cooper and I conducted on serial predators who prey on the elderly. I'm reflecting on the many similarities in this case and those that we studied. It's a stark reminder that criminal behaviors are consistent regardless of where the offender's from. Now, there may be unique characteristics that can be tied to ethnicity or regions in the world, but the motivation, the way the crimes are committed, seems consistent. Well, let's take a minute and talk about modus operandi, MO, this outward expression of an offender's way of committing a crime. It's often habitual and usually functional. In these particular cases, the MO centered on the way in which Petrov gained control. He would hunt for his victims at a nearby shopping center or post office, and his preferential victim again was elderly women, preferably women. Now, once he had properly groomed them, he would wait for the right moment to control, assault, and then kill them. It's difficult to tell for sure, but it appears to me that this method of grooming his victims became just too time consuming. So the killer started surprising his victims with a blitz style attack. As his confidence increased, his lust for blood intensified. Petrovs would simply knock on the door, pretending to be a utility worker needing access to the victim's apartment in order to read a meter. Unsuspecting widows would open their doors, and seconds later, he would assault them in a blitz style attack, choking them until they were dead or at least unconscious. Once he had either killed them or rendered them unconscious, he would place the victim in their nightgown and put them into their bed, staging the crime scenes. Holy cow, this is so reminiscent of Daniel Troyer, the serial killer from Salt Lake City. Now, Petrovs would later tell investigators that his crime was focused on robbery, stealing from the victim. He started murdering the victims just to minimize his risk of being reported or caught. When he started killing his victims, he realized that his chances of getting away with murder would increase if he cleaned up the victim and put them in their night clothes and into their beds. Unsuspecting neighbors and family members would discover their loved one, assume they died in their sleep, and have them buried, which is exactly what happened. And which is exactly why we wonder, are there more victims that we never knew about? I asked Sandra to take a moment and talk about what was being revealed in the video clip, which is all in Latvian. Here she describes all of the crimes that were going on and the things that Petrov was charged with. Let's listen in as she describes this from her perspective and point of view.
They are saying that on this day there is a trial starting on this serial killer, Kaspars Petrovs, who was murdered about 30 people, actually women, and who has been charged on attempted murder for 8 people, and all of those people were mostly elderly people, elderly women, and he got into their houses and flats by presenting himself as a representative of a gas company to check those gas meters. That's how he got into their flats. And the motive for all those murders was money and the jewelry, and he strangled his victims by some objects he could find in their houses, like, for example, towels or other piece of clothing maybe. And this went on for almost 3 years, and many of why he went undetected was the fact that he managed to strangle his victims so that there were no strangulation marks, really. And the police or the relatives or the doctors couldn't tell at first that there was a murder committed, and because those people were found in their beds, just lying peacefully, and it looked like if they had died of some like disease which elderly people may have, or just peacefully passed away.
Petrovs provided the glimpse into his psyche during the interviews he had with investigators. He described how he preferred the smaller apartment buildings in Latvian neighborhoods because there were enough apartment units that people wouldn't know who should be there or who shouldn't, made it easier to be undetected. He would select an apartment after surveilling the area and identifying a victim. Again, he would prefer to just knock on the door and, when it opened, force his way in and quickly assault and kill the victim. His comment regarding one murder series gave a frightening look into his personality. He said that he knocked on the door of a woman's home, and when she opened it, he presented himself as a gas company official who needed immediate access to check a meter. He went into the kitchen. He said he washed his hands and then he took a towel off the rack, dried off, walked into the other room where the woman was sitting, and strangled her. It was methodical and quick. Petrovs said that he then carried or drug her to the sofa where he laid her down, hoping that she'd appear to have died in her sleep. After he searched the home and retrieved the money that he could find, he noticed that the woman actually had a little bit of blood running from her nose. So he went back to the kitchen, took a different towel, and cleaned her up. He then took both towels, her key, and her money, locked the door to her residence, and walked away. He tried to minimize his confession by stating to investigators that he felt so terrible after that he started to vomit. Now, here's where things get spooky. Immediately after vomiting, he said he simply walked down the hall to another door and he knocked on it. When the elderly woman answered the door, he attacked her in a blitz-style attack, a frenzied attack. She remained conscious and screamed repeatedly, causing him to abandon his assault and run away. She survived. Here's a video of her talking in the court hearing when he was tried and convicted.
Nervi neiztur. Pārdzīvojumi pārāk lieli, tas ir sāpīgi.
I was so grateful I had Sandra to lean on, and especially for the translation. She clarified this is not a victim. This was the daughter of one of the victims, and she's describing how she found her. Let's listen as Sandra makes this a little clearer.
This is not a victim, it's a victim's daughter, actually. She's saying that she came back home and she went into the room and she discovered her mother just lying on the floor, and she had a small some drops of blood next to her mouth, and she was lying there, but she felt that there was something wrong.
As I said previously, Petrovs' crimes remind me of the serial killer Daniel Troyer. Again, this person that Greg Cooper and I interviewed as part of this U.S. Department of Justice study. Troyer and Petrovs stated that their motivation was initially to steal money and then just keep the victim from reporting him. For Troyer, it was much different. Sexual gratification was his primary motivation. And I find myself wondering about Petrovs. Now, in fairness, Petrovs again said he only wanted to knock his victims out so that he could steal their money. The reality is he went way overboard, killing at least 38 people. Troyer truthfully said that killing the elderly women was emotionally exciting and stimulating. The more I study Petrovs' behavior, I believe he would also sexually assault some of his victims, and that stealing their money was more of a practicality than a reason for the crime. He needed money. Petrovs stole a total of about $35,000 worth of money from his victims, and that included property. Now, he could have just simply snuck into homes undetected. This is the difference, folks. Instead, he chose to face his victims, choke them as he looked into their eyes, and then watch them slowly pass away. There is a huge difference in this kind of killer. Petrovs was so successful, in fact, that police tied him to this 38-plus murder spree over a 3-year period of time. That's a murder every single month. And we've talked about how these serial killers will create this cycle where they need to satisfy the itch, and then things settle down, and then they start fantasizing about another murder. Some reports suggest that he would have gotten away with the crimes even longer, but a police officer on one of the crimes actually collected a fingerprint, and when compared with a larger database, revealed Petrovs as a suspect. When he was questioned by police, he began confessing almost immediately. Now, in the police interviews and during his testimony in court, Petrovs tried to blame his criminal behavior on upbringing, his inability to make money like his father would make. He was quoted as saying, "I understood that I would not be able to earn as much as my family demanded from me. Therefore, I turned to crime." So there you got it. It's not his fault. It's his family's fault. Holy cow. Well, as he attempted to get the sympathy of the court, he also said, "All my life I felt that I'm different. I missed attention and I tried to compensate for it with my pranks and mischief." Well, he spent his time alone and he created this world of fantasy that he described became so vivid he couldn't tell the difference between his fantasies and reality. Petrovs was arrested on February 3rd, 2003 for the murder of 5 women in Riga, all pensioners. And by the time the case went to the trial, the indictment was amended to include 38 murders. His attempt at being found incompetent to stand trial failed as court-appointed psychiatrists deemed him sane. He confessed to all of the homicides and cooperated with investigators. Kaspars Petrovs sits in a Latvian prison today, thankfully so. Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. And here's the question I have for you. Do you believe that sexual motivation was involved in his crimes? Or do you think it really was only about money in the case of Kaspars Petrov? I'm going to be looking for your answers down below. And I really appreciate your support of Profiling Evil. Now, before we go, I wanted to ask Sandra a couple of more things about her homeland. One, to tell us how she feels about Riga and Latvia. Then to reflect on how she feels about her parents and the struggles that they went through. Let's listen in.
Oh, this is the city where I was born. I was born in Riga, and that's the capital city of Riga, and it's really beautiful. And yeah, I went to school here, and I just love it. From my mother's side, my mother's family, they used to live in the southern part of Latvia. They used to have a pretty large farm, and I believe it was 1940 or 49, can't tell exactly, but they were on the list to be deported from Latvia to put in cattle carriages and to send to Siberia as well. But some neighbors came and warned them that they were on the list. So luckily they just made a decision to go into the woods and didn't take like almost anything with them, just like clothes where they were in, and then they spent about 3 to 4 months living in the woods.
Oh my goodness.
And afterwards they came out and they were again moved to some other part of Latvia, and all their properties were taken. They never got them back, actually.
And finally, as we close out this chapter, I want to thank Sandra, but I'd like her to take a moment and share with you what it meant for her when Latvia won its independence. She was a young mother with children. Let's listen in.
Oh, that was incredible, and unbelievable. We couldn't hope for that. It was also depressing, but when those signs started to appear that maybe we can have a breakthrough and we could get our freedom back, yeah, we just went for it. There was no life or death matter. We went for it. All the people in Latvia, there was such a unity, unbelievable. I can't describe this into words. Yes, we were like on barricades here in Riga in winter. It was incredible time. It signified we either live or die, or we have to fight, you know. we had to find, and then people were ready to do anything. They were supporting each other, coming here, bringing food, bringing tea, bringing whatever clothes for those who were on the barricades and helping
Would you please take a moment, hit that like and the subscribe button, ring the bell so that you get all of the notifications on our videos like this one. It's been great being here in Latvia. I'm going to be meeting with more of the Profiling Evil family members who are in this country as the days go on. And then I'm heading over to Poland, and I hope to meet some of you there. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon at the next crime scene.